Man, does anyone remember before the second part of Inside Job released that images of Ron with Reagan came out and most fans thought that Ron was actually Reagan's secret brother or something since they looked similar? And because of this, people were against the idea of them being in a relationship, no? Yeah, I guess that makes sense, as they were quick to become a power couple to most. Oh, how I wish I could say I was most. Alrighty, I'm gonna need some context to save me from those pitchforks for comments I'm sure some of you already have lined up for not being a fan of the ship that's plot-dominated a majority of Reagan's story of the season. And trust me, I am just as disappointed as the rest of y'all. Basically, the second part of Inside Job came out late last year, picking up where we left off with Ridley, aka Reagan's dad, who ends up hijacking both her promotion and leaving her right where she started back in the first part, but with even more resentment towards her father after the events of episode 10. And with that resentment along with the need for revenge, she attempts to get her co-workers to join her mutiny, but none of them are willing to support her, as it really doesn't make that much of a difference to them considering their last boss was JR. So since Reagan is struggling to accept that she can't change that her dad is in charge, Brett figures he could help her out by recommending her to go to a therapy group that deals with people like Reagan called Anonymous, which honestly, after everything she's been through, yeah, therapy sounds about right. It's at this therapy session that Reagan meets Ron Statler, a mind eraser from the Illuminati, and right off the bat, these two hate each other, with Ron not sympathizing with Reagan in the slightest over her erased memories and stolen promotion, and Reagan instantly deciding she wants to spite him by leaving the meeting to take down her father to prove him wrong. Ah, so the good old enemies to lovers trope, eh? I see this show is starting to get me invested in this ship, and this is definitely a good start. Oh, wait, hold that thought. They instantly begin to get along? Oh, and they hook up by the end of the episode? They become therapy buddies? Where's the rivalry I was presented with? The juicy I hate you but I want you mess. Whatever. It looks like it's going down a different route, but hey, maybe something even better will come out of it, like an impactful development that will perfectly explain why everyone was in tears of how their relationship concluded. Well, at least now I can understand why everyone thought the ending was sad, but at the same time, I feel absolutely nothing about it. And yes, I'm aware of how harsh that sounds, but I ain't gonna lie, this just felt underdeveloped and bland. And I have a couple of reasons of why it feels like this. The first one is that Ron and Reagan's relationship feels solely focused on Reagan, as pretty much every obstacle typically gets in her way or helps her develop, while Ron is just along for the ride. No, but seriously, I can literally summarize his character by saying at the start he was literally Reagan just as a guy, before he was downgraded to being just Reagan's awkward boyfriend who feels like he's not good enough for her, which is kinda cute sometimes, but aside from that, Ron has no substance to him, not even to his backstory. Like, this isn't even me being nitpicky. I went back and I rewatched the second part of Inside Job and there really isn't all that much to him, aside from that he feels a lot of guilt having a hand in erasing the minds of people and having to live with those memories, which, yeah, I can assume that's a pretty rough thing for a person to bear by themselves, but it's one of those things where it's told and not shown. And if you know me or my content, you actually might be aware of how much I despise the tell without the show, because my dumb brain needs to have an actual picture painted before my eyes to understand the full scope of things. Especially when Ron makes it clear that he hates erasing minds but only keeps doing it as there isn't really much else he has going for him in life that he's good at. But when Reagan comes along, he finds meaning outside of his job and he finally just wants to be done with the shadow government. Yet there's a problem with his want to leave. That problem is Reagan, and no, it's not because he doesn't want to quit because he thinks he won't be close to her if he does. It's actually Reagan who believes that, which brings us to our next reason of why their relationship doesn't work. Reagan's dependency. Throughout the second part, while it's clear that both of them love each other, it's obvious that Reagan was obsessed to make it work no matter the issues that reared its head. Ron says he doesn't like to mix business with pleasure, coax him into it by making it seem easy, but when it looks like they're gonna miss their dinner plans, she decides to rush the process and makes Ron believe he burned down Rome. Ron makes it clear that he wants to quit erasing minds and leave the shadow government, but also continue to date Reagan. She doesn't believe their relationship would last and and wants him to work with her despite her own job being hell for her. Brett and Ron don't get along, force Brett to drink to the point where a virus he affected himself with spreads through the entire company, causing Ron to have to wipe the entire building's memories. If this stuff was spread out further than 8 episodes, it would be one thing, but the fact these almost happen back to back makes these problems more noticeable. And while Reagan isn't entirely at fault for their friendship virus, it also wouldn't have happened if Reagan didn't push for Ron to join Incognito and accept that their relationship would have been perfectly fine without their jobs to talk about. Reagan becomes so desperate to make their relationship work, she only causes them both pain by trying to force both her love life and work to be the same thing, and it led to her having to make a choice of what would make them both the happiest, and she uses the hollow chamber to make a decision that would make them both happy. And in each and every scenario, they always end up fighting because Reagan can't pick between Ron or Incognito, so it's only fitting that the only scenario where they're both happy together is the one we don't get to see. Because it doesn't exist. It never did. Ron would never be happy with Reagan because Reagan can't let herself be happy, if that means she would have to sacrifice the greater good of the world. Reagan and Ron's relationship had a decent concept, and while the conclusion of it was definitely sad for Reagan, I can't really feel much disappointment in it when from the start it had a toxic dependency coming from Reagan for a character that was essentially herself in a lot of ways. But perhaps that's what makes the end of their relationship more bittersweet than it does sad. That maybe while Reagan can't let herself be happy, she can let go of a kindred spirit so they can be happy in her place. Sure, people before the second part came out were going to be against this ship because of how Ron and Reagan looked alike, but that never affected how I was gonna feel about their relationship going in, and I did end up developing my own headcanon of what direction I thought Ron's character was gonna go in, and that was, I thought it was gonna be revealed that he was a clone of Reagan. Okay, yeah, that sounds far-fetched, but a lot of things just kept lining up for me as the season went on, with us not knowing a whole lot about Ron outside of his job and his religious background, the way he looked and acted similar to Reagan, and the thing that cemented this theory in my head was that it was revealed that Andre hooked up with one of his clones in episode 4, and that gave that theory some foreshadowing to be true. It wasn't, but man, that really had me thinking about it for the rest of the season, so that put a big hole in my liking of the ship. But I don't know, maybe if this part wasn't shorter than the first one, we could have gotten some better development for Ron, who's pretty much just the token love interest after being introduced, and he could have really used an episode just for himself and not just to be a side character in Reagan's story only being brought up for her own plots. So anyway, regardless of how I feel and how I don't ship it, if others do, that's literally fine. I just don't feel the same way. It's a for real shame though, because I really did want to like this ship, especially with the unfair discourse that began before the second part even came out, but no, I just didn't vibe with Ron nor his relationship with Reagan. Yet, you know what I did end up vibing with? Brett's and Reagan's relationship, which I still can't believe I love as much as I do, since I usually don't like the main female lead and main male lead becoming an item, since how overplayed or forced it feels for a lot of other shows, but here it actually works really well. From the start, while it was a bit rocky for Brett and Reagan over the course of the season, we see how well they complement each other, going from Reagan hating the very idea of working with Brett to considering Brett her best friend. I only bring up their friendship because I believe that Reagan sending Brett to another reality without her, with the knowledge she may never see Brett again, is more impactful than Reagan choosing to let Ron live a life where he never remembers her. Because compared to her relationship with Ron, her friendship with Brett is so much more real and genuine from all the time we've spent with them versus what little we did with her romance with Ron. Brett from the beginning was actively helping Reagan out more than anybody else in the show, despite not even knowing her that well, and because of that he forms the first ever healthy bond he's ever truly had, and he grows to care about her, and that care is what helps Reagan grow to be a better person, not only for herself but for Brett too, and she's able to give her own type of care back to Brett later on and helps him stand up for himself towards his family, something he never would have been able to do without Reagan. Ron and Reagan were never meant to be built to last, but Brett and Reagan are perfect for each other, whether it's just as friends or even as more if the relationship develops past the point. And I, for one, can't wait to see what next season brings for them both. Wait, what? What do you mean it was canceled?